Does US President Donald Trump have an exit strategy for the war with Iran? He's reportedly under pressure to set a deadline, but with contradicting statements from his administration, when will the offensive end? And on what terms? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. Yet again, US President Donald Trump has suggested the war in Iran could be over soon. Well, he didn't say when or how, only that it could end any time he wants it to. Well, advisors, they're reportedly urging him to find an exit strategy. But US ally Israel has indicated it's in for the long haul until what it calls the existential threat posed by Iran is eliminated. Well, for its part, Tehran has set its own conditions for ending the drone and missile attacks across the region. These include international guarantees there will be no future hostilities. Well, as the war is increasingly taking a toll on the global economy, how could it end? We'll talk to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Kaylee Callahan.
As the US-Israeli offensive against Iran enters a second week, questions are mounting over the Trump administration's objectives and timeline for the war. Officials have issued conflicting statements, as has the president himself, sometimes on the same day. On Monday, Donald Trump seemed confident of a quick victory.
I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. How good is our military, right?
But when pressed, appeared to contradict himself.
Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared?
Well, I think you could say it both. The beginning, it's the beginning of building a new country.
Rewind to before the military campaign began. During his State of the Union address, Trump said US forces had destroyed Iran's nuclear development program in June last year. 3 days before, though, his special envoy Steve Witkoff warned Iran was only a week away from a nuclear bomb. During the offensive, White House officials have suggested attacks could last up to 6 weeks, while the defense officials said the campaign would continue until Iran's military capabilities are completely dismantled. The shifting goal lines have fueled criticism that Washington lacks a clear endgame. Trump is also under pressure from Israel. The Israeli defense minister said this week that his country is prepared for a prolonged war to eliminate what Israel calls the existential threat posed by Iran.
This operation, led by US President Donald Trump and Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who speak and coordinate daily, will continue without any time limit for as long as necessary until we achieve all the objectives.
For its part, Iran has remained defiant. Its retaliatory strikes have interrupted oil and gas supplies from the Gulf and disrupted global energy markets. President Masoud Pezeshkian says Tehran wants what he says are its legitimate rights to be recognised, as well as reparations and international guarantees that it will not be attacked in the future. For now, the battlefield dynamics appear to be shifting daily, with neither side showing willingness to concede. Kaylee Callahan for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guest now. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Adolfo Franco, a Republican strategist and former advisor to US Senator John McCain. In Tehran, Foad Izadi, professor at the Faculty of World Studies at the University of Tehran. And Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson is in Falls Church, Virginia. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel and former chief of staff for U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell. Thank you all for joining us. If I could start with Adolfo. So does Donald Trump have an off-ramp to this war that you can see, Adolfo?
Well, I think we're far from an off-ramp. We're just went on the highway from that ramp.
Really? But then, Adolfo, how do we explain what Donald Trump said on March 11th? The war will end soon, he said. There's practically nothing left to target.
Well, let me answer that. The president's initial comments, and have been consistent, have been that this conflict would last 4 to 6 weeks. Now, what the president said, what you're referencing is that we're ahead of schedule on that 4 to 6 time frame that he gave in terms of the number of weeks that we require to finish the job. We haven't even been into this conflict for 2 weeks. And we've eliminated Iran's air defenses, its air force, disseminated most of its navy, and of course have attacked its facilities that produce and launch ballistic missiles and drones, which are significantly down. Now, we never underestimated the power of Iran to retaliate and to do what it's doing. And that's why the president correctly said this is a 4 to 6 week operation to get this job done, which it needs to be done. Now, the job that's before the president is what's ongoing, which is neutralizing Iran's ability to threaten its neighbors, of course, and world security through the development of nuclear enrichment that would lead to a nuclear bomb or bombs that it could use. So the mission is very clear. It's on schedule. No one said this was going to be 12 hours or anything of that sort. I think the president's been clear from the beginning.
Okay. How do you see this, Lawrence? Is this the complete success that we hear from supporters of the president when some of those milestones, which we just heard now from Adolfo, things like the destruction of the Iranian Navy, its air force, its air defense systems, they weren't outlined as the goals of this war before the war started, right? How can it be a measure of the success of the mission now?
I think we have been led down the primrose path, so to speak, with regard to the objects of this military operation by both Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump. I think they are worried right now considerably, despite what was just said. And let me call your attention to a speech by their foreign minister, the Israeli foreign minister, Gideon Sa'ar, yesterday, wherein he as much as admitted some very substantial things. One, that Israel, and implied was the United States, are not going to cause regime change in Iran, that the Iranian people are the only ones who can do that. And my question at the moment in my own head was, dear man, why have you spent billions of dollars and cost thousands of lives, including school children and nurses in hospitals, and blanketed 10 million people in Tehran with poisonous gas? Why have you done that only to learn what most sane people knew well ahead of time, that you are not going to cause regime change in Iran, that it's up to the Iranian
Lawrence,
people to do that.
let me jump in as well.
And then the second thing, wait a minute. And then the second thing he said in his attempt to explain why they weren't beating Hezbollah either, he tried to shift the blame majorly to Donald Trump, which I don't blame him a bit, because Donald Trump's staying power in this is extremely limited because it is one of the most unpopular wars this country has ever engaged in. And the American people are increasingly realizing that he's waging it primarily to get their attention off the Epstein scandal. And he's not going to win it by any sense of that term. So the American people are turning rapidly against this war, including much of the MAGA group that elected him.
All right, I was going to try and jump in and pose, but I could see that I think Adolfo is going to come back with some. Let me give you
I have to say, with all due respect, this is a 1930s appeasement mentality. First of all, President Trump has made it clear that what his objective here has not to have. Well, let me finish. Let me finish, Colonel. Since you worked for a secretary,
all right, Lawrence, let's just give him a chance, Lawrence, and I'll come back to you in a second, Lawrence.
This is the type of appeasement that, of course, would have resolved World War II before it started. Number one is the president's objective has been Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That has been the key. Now, why the defenses, I disagree with you, where the defenses had to be eliminated is because we had to ensure that Iran is completely neutralized militarily. That has been the objective.
Adolfo, the IAEA Director General did say he didn't see any evidence of a structured program to manufacture nuclear weapons on March the 2nd, right? So...
Let me finish this MAGA discussion by a person who's obviously not even a Republican, only in name. 85% of Republicans support
Glad I'm
President
not a Republican
Trump
by any
in this
other
effort.
name.
So this is the fact. Yes, you are.
Okay,
You work for
gentlemen, let's try and focus on the issue and depersonalize the discussion. Adolfo, I'm going to ask you kindly to observe that.
Pursuing this effort.
All right, you know what? Maybe it's a good time to bring in Foad Izadi into the discussion. Foad, how is this being seen in Iran as Iran tries to read the pulse of the Trump administration? Is there a feeling in Iran that the Trump administration is looking for an off-ramp?
You know, Iran did not start this war. This is a war of choice by Trump and Netanyahu. They were not worried about Iran's nuclear program. Trump claimed a few months ago that he totally destroyed Iran's nuclear program. And I suggest you read the intelligence community's report on Iran's nuclear program. Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the intelligence community, presented that report to the Senate Intelligence Committee in the Congress. The report is available online, dni.gov. It's in English. Your other guests could read it. The report says three things about Iran's nuclear program. The first thing it says is that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. The second thing it says that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon program. And the third thing it says is that the Iranian leaders have not decided to have a nuclear weapon program. And when they asked Trump about this report of his intelligence community, he dismissed it and he decided to go with Netanyahu's version. Netanyahu has been saying that Iran is 6 months away from a nuclear weapon.
That's a bit of the background.
The
but now, how does Iran look at the Trump administration's desire or lack of it to continue this war? How is that read?
It's not very difficult. They can stop attacking Iran. As we are speaking, I'm in Tehran. They are bombing us as we are speaking. My father was here just a few minutes ago. When I'm done with your program, I have to call to see if he reached his house safely. They're killing 100, 200 civilians on a daily basis. We have lost over 1,400 civilians so far. They can just stop attacking Iran, and Iranian leaders will decide what needs to happen next. You have a reformist government in Dr. Pezeshkian. I think they didn't want to have this war. A diplomatic solution was available. This is a regime change operation. And it's obvious you don't want to reach a diplomatic solution with the regime that you want to change. This did not need to happen. We had the Omani foreign minister saying an agreement was available within 24 hours. And Trump attacked Iran less than 24 hours after that interview. So they can stop attacking Iran. From what I hear from your guest in Washington, they want to continue for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Iran can continue. There's this culture of resistance here. We can do it also.
Okay, let's, Adolfo, I know you want to get in, but just give me a second. I want to give Lawrence a chance, and then we'll come back to you. Lawrence, what do you make of the arguments that we heard and we hear from people like Adolfo? Well, there were bigger issues at stake, whether it's Iran's missile program, Iran's nuclear program, that was really Iran's relationship with its allies. That was the real goal, and that it's a complete success. How do you read that?
Listening to Donald Trump and his people like Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, War, one doesn't know what the objectives are. As a military professional, I object strenuously to that. I can't believe that we're waging a war that is now costing, I learned this morning, $5 billion a day. We have a $40 trillion aggregate debt, by the way, with $1 trillion interest payments, soon to be $2 trillion annually on that debt. And we're costing the American taxpayer $5 billion a day with this war. And I suspect it's even more than that when you factor in all the elements involved. And we've joined the homicidal maniac in Israel in prosecuting this war, who has been nothing but a war criminal since the start of the campaign against Gaza. And now he's in Lebanon, even deepening the war crimes. Look at the war crimes we've committed already. The school was a war crime. The hospital was a war crime. The oil facilities in proximity of Tehran were a war crime. Look what Iran did in response to oppose that. They conducted a very precise strike on Haifa. Haifa is now pretty much out of action as Israel's only remaining oil port. Iran's conduct of this war has been as one can do in war, mostly within the confines of what we've understood since the Nuremberg Tribunal and the Geneva Conventions as the way civilized people, and I emphasize that, should conduct war.
Right.
Our conduct has been absolutely the opposite of that, with war crime after war crime, and we don't seem to have any compunction about it whatsoever.
Okay, let me give Adolfo a chance to come in, but I want to put this message to you. When you said a moment ago, Adolfo,
I would like a little up-air time here.
I'll give you some time, but just think about the question this way: when you were referencing the off-ramp, that have we not heard confusing messages from this Trump administration about what the measure of success might even be in order for there to be an off-ramp? You might remember, I'm sure you do, on June the 25th, Donald Trump said US strikes had obliterated the nuclear program, but he also said it set it back decades and Iran didn't even have time to move anything out of those sites. On February 21st, US envoy Steve Witkoff says Iran was probably a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material. And 3 days later, Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, says, well, the attack did in fact obliterate Iran's nuclear facilities. So what is it? What is the end goal here that could measure an exit or an off-ramp? Is there a clear one?
Yes, I just repeated it. And that is that to neutralize Iran militarily in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's number one, to ensure that Iran can never develop a nuclear weapon. Iran has now refined, by its own admission, uranium to 60% level. It's very easy to get to 90%. You don't need more than 20% for peaceful purposes. So it's bent on a path to develop nuclear weapons. But this is a regime, since the other guest was saying about war crimes, that's eliminated 32,000 of its own people in peaceful protest.
That's a lie.
How do we know those numbers? Where do we get those numbers from, Adolfo?
Those are I think, reported internationally by humanitarian organizations and the rest. If I may, since we have two guests, since we have two.
Okay, Foad, let's give Adolfo a chance to finish the thought. Sorry, Foad. Let me just give Adolfo a fair chance. Foad, we will come to you. Bear with me. Go ahead, Adolfo.
I did not interrupt the two other guests who are supporting Iran, so I want to support my position here for a moment and be able to speak. Yes, thousands of people have been killed by the Iranian regime, their own people. Of course, human rights, this is an organization that's been conducting terrorism in the region and supporting state-sponsored terrorism for really 47 years. That's very clear. It's attacked American soldiers. It's killed. It was behind the U.S.'s cold attack and the rest of it. So to defend the Iranian regime that is a threat to world and regional security, to me, is unbelievable that certainly any American could support that. Keep in mind that the guest from the United States worked for a Secretary of State that he's concerned about money that spent trillions of dollars in a war effort that failed to occupy Iraq and Afghanistan and lied in the United Nations about weapons of mass destruction. So this is a curious turn of events on this. But the fact before us today, this off-ramp, we're on the ramp. We're on the way to 4 to 6 weeks to eliminate this regime.
Mission accomplished.
Okay.
That was under your watch.
All right, let's give Foad a chance to weigh
that was
accomplished.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll have time to come back to each of you.
You have two guests representing Iran here. So you have The mission accomplished was a statement by President Bush, so your viewers know.
Understood. Understood.
And Secretary Powell and Mr. Wilkerson worked for the president that said that. The difference is President Trump will accomplish the mission.
Okay.
Again, we haven't even been in 2 weeks into this conflict. Our mission here is to destroy the military capabilities of a regime that is brutal, barbaric to its own people and threatens security.
Okay, you've made that point clear, Adolfo.
Yesterday,
and I've given you
135 countries lined up on a resolution.
We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's go over to Foad Izadi in Tehran. I know you want to come back in on some of those things, but I do want to put a point to move the discussion along. What will be Iran's position on a unilateral US announcement of an end to the war? Will Iran accept that and say, fine, if the US says its mission accomplished, we just walk away?
They need to make sure two things happen. The first thing is that they want to make sure that the country is not attacked by two nuclear regimes every few months. You cannot run a country when United States and Israel attack you whenever they want illegally to achieve
how would
regime
Iran
change,
guarantee that, Fuad?
They could say it. Trump could come and say that we are done with attacking Iran. He could say that as long as I'm president.
Would Iran trust the word of Donald Trump, given the history of distrust?
That would help. Trusting Trump would be a difficult thing to do, but him saying it would be useful. The second thing would be the creation of a setup to compensate Iran. The Trump administration and Netanyahu have devastated Iran's civilian infrastructure. They have killed thousands of innocent people. They need to pay. They need to pay Iran. They need to compensate Iran. And it could be done through leveling tax on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. It could be done through different things. But until they realize that changing Iran's government is a pipe dream, they will try to repeat this huge mistake again. Trump has managed to unite Iranians more than any Iranian politician could ever do. They are basing their policies on ideas that are not going to work, and they're killing a lot of people in the process. Iran needs to make sure that this stops.
All right. Very, very briefly, I repeat briefly, Adolfo, I want to give you a chance to answer one point before I go to Lawrence, but please, very briefly, do you see any scenario in any parallel universe, shall we say, in which the Donald Trump administration will accept those kinds of conditions from Iran? Briefly, please.
Absolutely not. That is the most ludicrous statement I have heard from a totalitarian, brutal regime. The compensation will come with the elimination of the regimes.
Genocidal people.
Genocidal is your dictatorship turning on your own people, and your dictatorship has sponsored terrorism throughout the region.
All right, it's a good time now, gentlemen. Let's take a moment to give Lawrence a chance to speak, because he's been waiting patiently. Lawrence, if the US would not accept those kinds of Iranian conditions to end the conflict, what are the options open? You're somebody who has obviously a military background and experience. Does the US move up the escalation ladder? What are the next steps up the escalation ladder?
I don't know if you heard Senator Blumenthal the other day, but he was absolutely apoplectic when he came out of the intelligence briefing about possible ground troops on the ground in Iran. That would be an absolute disaster. It would make Iraq and Afghanistan combined look like a cakewalk.
Do you think that's serious?
That's where we could go there. Trump has said things like that. And I'm hearing the rumors from the Pentagon that they are contemplating using ground forces. This would be the ruin of the region and our presence there. We would never be invited back, as it were. But let me just say one thing in particular. I'm speaking on behalf of the Iranian people who are dying under our bombs. I'm not speaking in behalf of the regime. And I'm speaking on behalf of the American people who, in poll after poll now, register such majorities as 75% of them, including many Republicans and many MAGA Republicans, who are opposed to this war for very different reasons, but nonetheless, they're opposed. They're right, and the rest are wrong.
Adolfo, let's let Lawrence finish the thought. Adolfo, I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Lawrence.
And we're not going to get out of it in one piece.
Okay, and I'll give you a chance to come back in then, Adolfo.
Yeah, this is the man that just spoke, who was working for the administration that put ground troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the man that supported all the wrong foreign policy objectives.
So I should know how much a mistake it was, shouldn't I?
Well,
that's an incredible
and this is the man, and this is the man who was chief of staff.
Argument.
This was the man who worked for chief of staff who lied to the United Nations. Now, here is the reality of what is going on. Iranian people, Iran has been behind terrorism throughout the region. It is killing its own people, and it is a threat to world security. And President Trump's strategy is to neutralize it. What will come next is up to the Iranian people, and that's been very clear.
All right, I think you've made that, gentlemen, you've made that point. We've got a brief minute left, so I want to give Foad a chance to come back on this. Foad, in 60 seconds.
These people live in pipe dreams. Iranians are more united than ever. They are coming to the streets every night in millions. This is what Netanyahu asked them to do. But they're coming and shouting against Netanyahu and Trump and people like your other guests that are warmongers. Iran has a civilization
is Iran not also shooting itself
years.
in the foot with the the moves we've seen at the United Nations Security Council? A lot of countries lining up against Iran.
It's sad. Iran did not want to see this. They need to blame Trump and Netanyahu for starting this war. We don't like even American soldiers get killed. These are young people with young families. They shouldn't die for the Epstein class. The Epstein class is killing little Iranian girls and raping little American girls.
Okay, I'm afraid we are out of time. I know that we would all love to continue this discussion further, and I certainly have a lot more points, but perhaps we'll all have the chance to come back and the focus to come back and discuss this in goodwill again. Thank you all to our guests, Adolfo Franco, Foad Izadi, and Lawrence Wilkerson. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami, Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, is goodbye.